So, hi, my name is Edmund Tran. I am a academic mentor with ESM Prep, do test prep, and also some academic work, including AP Calculus. So, all right, let me share my screen here. Okay, here we go. All right, so you probably are familiar, if you're taking AP Calculus, it's probably not the only AP class that you're taking, so probably familiar with the 1 to 5 scale and the rigor of it. But things have changed from what you might have heard from maybe your friends taking it last year, right? For one thing, right? It is back to the paper and pencil format. So you don't have that short computer format anymore. Actually, that was 2 years ago. Even last year, it was already a longer test, right? So now you're going to get the full length test, 3 hours and 15 minutes. And that is going to be May 9th at 8 a.m., wherever you're at. And that's both the AB and the BC tests, right? Since they figured no one's going to be taking both tests at once. So, both tests, right? So they just scheduled it for the same time. So what does that mean? We are looking at about a month and a half, right, left to study. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about that timeline, what you should be doing with that month and a half. All right. Well, most people are going to be taking AB, right, which will cover derivatives and its applications, integrals and its applications, okay? And a lot of people, that is enough to get a solid understanding of calculus, what it is, and also just to, get that payoff for like, what was I doing all this stuff in pre-calculus for, right? Like, what was it all building up to? And it's very satisfying to be able to take calculus and be like, oh, right, I see the big picture now, right? This is why we were learning about vertical asymptotes and all the different types of functions and trig, right? All of that will make its way back into calculus and analyzing features of graphs, right? Okay. BC, right, is going to expand on some of the stuff that you might have started in pre-calculus too, right? Like a lot of pre-calculus classes will talk about parametric equations, polar. You've been learning like the de Moivre's theorem, right? You would have already had experience with vectors, sequences, and series, but they're going to take it to the calculus level, right? Doing BC things like, finding the derivative of a parametric equation, of a polar equation. Okay, well, before you were just doing series, like adding a bunch of numbers, but what about expressing a polynomial as, right, as a Taylor series? So all of that is that extra material that gets tacked on the BC, and it's a solid, I would say it's a solid, almost like a semester's worth. So, many people took AB and then they take BC, but if you were like me, you just went straight from pre-calculus to BC, then you really went on an accelerated curriculum path, right? So you would have to review a lot of stuff. So what does the AP Calc test look like? Well, for both AB and BC, there's going to be a multiple choice section, and there's going to be a free response section, and they both are equally weighted. They contribute the same amount towards your grade. So you can't really neglect one and still end up with a good score, okay? And it's also, if you're used to the SAT with its no calc stuff, right? Well, this is put on by the College Board, right? Same people who do the SAT. So they love this no calc stuff. And so the first 30 questions out of 45 in your multiple choice test will be no calc, right? You do it, and then they're like, hey, it's now you're getting into the calc section. You can take out your calculator now, do the 15. All right, you're done. You can leave your calculator out because the beginning of the free response is going to be 2 more calculator problems that are free response. And then put your calculator away. You got 4 no calc problems. Okay, so they will mark it as a part A, part B for multiple choice, part A, part B for free response. All right, and then your proctor will tell you when to switch to each section. And again, this is why it's so important to do those practice tests, so that you can kind of, none of this stuff catches you off guard on the real day, right? Okay. Couple of other housekeeping things, right? Just like recent SATs and ACT, right? There's no guessing penalty on the multiple choice, right? So that means don't leave any bubbles blank, right? That means if you don't know how to do a problem, maximize your chances. Make educated guesses. Don't make random guesses, right? Don't just go see, right? Find out, is there a way, like, can I at least, like, okay, maybe I can't find, maybe I couldn't calculate its derivative, but I know it's positive because the function's increasing, right? So then at least I can like narrow down some choices, okay? And then the free response, that's graded by a rubric, right? So like most of these questions are going to be worth like 2 or 3 points, and they ask you, and the questions themselves, when I say that there's 6 questions in the free response, it's really like 6 questions each with 3 or 4 parts, like part A, part B, part C. So you're really answering a lot more than 6 questions. But then each of those sub questions will be worth 2 to 3 points, around there. And the way that it's doled out is with a rubric system, okay? And so they'll say like, okay, and most of the time, the way it's set up is that you'll get a point for the setup, right? Like, did you set up this integral correctly? Did you set up this equation correctly for this word problem? And then you get another point for the actual execution, right? Did you actually calculate it correctly without making any mistakes? So it's not completely do or die like multiple choice, but it's pretty close, right? Like, you set it up, and if you just like mess up a little thing, you drop, and you just get the wrong answer, I don't think you get credit for it. So, so you still have to be very careful. Okay. We'll also talk about like sometimes the questions will have the question itself will ask for like more than one thing, right? So they'll be like, give me the answer, but use correct units, right? Well, then that means you're going to get 1 point for the answer, and you're going to get 1 point for like writing the units, right? Because sometimes that's not trivial for a calculus question. So if that's the case, then you really have to be careful about answering every question fully, right? Because a lot of people, they leave stuff off. It's not because they don't know how to do it. It's just because they were careless and they didn't see that little clause in the section, right? And that little clause could be something like, tell us the answer and provide justification. So they want you to write an explanation, right? Like, tell me what theorem you used to get to this answer, right? Did you use intermediate value theorem? So if you just get the answer and you're just like, oh yeah, like everyone could follow my work, like I'm good, you could lose like half your credit just because you didn't say what the justification was. So be very careful and read that question very carefully, and even annotate, like circle it if it's multiple parts that you need to make sure that you hit, okay? All right. Okay, so like I said, you got about 6 weeks left. You basically have learned most of what you need to know, right? So I think if your teachers plan this well, you should be wrapping up all of your new material pretty soon, right? So that way you can dedicate April to just doing peer review, like just doing tons of questions so that you get a good sense of the terminology that they use, the style that they use, what's considered in the scope of the AP test, right? Like how tricky can they get, right? Because it is sort of similar to the SAT in that they are not making problems that are tedious just for the sake of tedium, you know? Like they're not trying to make you lose points on like, oh, it's the fraction's been nested like 5 different times, like you're bound to screw up. Like that's not what they're testing you on, right? It's a pretty straightforward test, and that usually people are losing points because of some conceptual thing, or yeah, you know, maybe they there's like a misunderstanding of something, but it's not going to be giant numbers and crazy, you know, things like that. So so that's the similarity with the SAT, right? Although I will say there will be problems that take you a lot more than 1 minute, okay, which is like, or more than 2 minutes even, right? So that's a little, that part's a little bit different than the SAT, where like everything you can expect to be in a nice like bite-sized problem, right? And if you're spending a lot of time on a problem, then something's wrong. On AP Calc, you got to learn the new pacing, right? There are still plenty of like 30-second problems on AP Calc, okay? So it'll be similar to that, but it's not ordered. There's no, yeah, it's not ordered in order of difficulty. You're just gonna have to take them as they come, okay? So what does that mean? I would still do everything in order, by the way, okay? But if you're going to, if you want to skip a problem, I recommend making your best educated guess right then and there, and then just mark it in your booklet. And then if you have time at the very end, you go through your booklet for the marked questions, okay? But I don't recommend, you know, leaving blank bubbles and things like that. There's just too much stuff that can happen where you forget or you start misbubbling things. So, okay. So, yeah. So hopefully you get at least a month of just like pure practice reviewing stuff, because especially that early stuff, right, you might be a little rusty on, like limit definition of a derivative, right? Like, oh, that was the first month of calculus, right? So you're gonna, all that stuff is fair game and it will be tested. And so you want to spend about a month doing just AP practice tests. And your teacher should have like a nice bank of old AP exams, okay? If you don't for some reason, you can look for it online, or you can email me at etran@esmprep.com and I will send some your way, okay? And these, the reason why I recommend doing those tests instead of something like, you know, a third party test prep guide book, right, is that, again, you want to get used to the level of difficulty. You don't want like watered down questions, and you also want to get used to the pacing, right? So these tests have been carefully edited and everything like that, so it's the best preparation you have, okay? I'm not saying never buy those books. You can still do it, and especially if you feel like you are not vibing with your textbook and you need some kind of easier, more accessible reference, right? Those books can be pretty good because they just kind of like distill everything that you need to know, right? They might skip like the proofs that you won't need to know and things like that. So, okay. All right. So we obviously don't have enough time in this webinar to actually dive into the content. right? But if you're a calculus student, like at the very bare minimum, you should understand some of the big themes of calculus, right? Because they will test you on these things directly and indirectly, right? So a lot of this is not about, like I said, not about like tedious calculations, but just understanding conceptually what is a derivative, what is an integral, okay? So so know why you're doing the things that you're doing. They give you a function, right? So many people, their first instinct, oh, I'm just going to take the derivative of it. You better ask yourself why you're taking the derivative of it, right? Like, are you doing this to find some kind of instantaneous rate of change? Are you doing this to find a min-max of the graph, right? Understand why you're doing it instead of before, and plan it out before you just dive in and just do the first thing that comes to mind, okay? Understand limits, right? And why did you learn limits in the beginning in the first place, right? It was to enable you to understand derivatives and integrals, right? Limits are important to both of them because you are talking about the limit as, right, those 2 points of your secant line get closer and closer and closer so that the change in x is approaching 0, and you want to find the rate of change, right? And normally that slope equation is not going to be defined if your denominator is 0. So you need limits to be able to talk derivatives. And you need limits to be able to understand integrals, because that Riemann rectangle, right, is getting thinner and thinner and thinner until it's basically have a width of approaching 0, but it can't actually have a width of 0 because then it wouldn't be a rectangle, okay? So understanding these limits is going to basically help you tie all this stuff together and understand conceptually, right? When you see limits on your test, it's not just a giant block of expression, right? You know how to interpret it, okay? Of course, as I have here, right, limits are going to be used to describe end behavior, right? What happens as x approaches infinity. If you're in BC, you're going to use it for infinite series, right? And then I would say a lot of the test is also, right, in using these derivatives to describe functions, right? To find out landmark points like the maximum, the minimum, the point of inflection. Okay, so you need to know that because they'll ask you both just like mathematically, like they'll just give you the, they'll give you a function, they'll just straight up just ask you these things, but they'll also ask you indirectly in terms of like a word problem, right? Oh, what is the maximum profit? When is the, right? You could have like a related rates problem, right? Where you're going to have to use derivatives, okay, to find certain points. All right, so hopefully you have amassed like a nice set of notes that you can refer to, right? And that this is going to pay off and help you study. The whole point is not to have notes that, I mean, hopefully, it's too late to change your note, really your note taking at this point, but hopefully throughout the year, you've been building notes that you understand, right? Written in a way that when you look at it, you can have a nice, quick refresher of whatever concept you're looking up that is more efficient than looking up, a textbook, okay? But if you, for some reason, don't have that, there are a lot of third-party resources that can help you study, right? Not saying that you have to go to AP Classroom and watch every single video or whatever, right? These resources are meant for you to pick and choose, right? And target, customize your study plan. Oh, whatever you are kind of hazy on, just go straight to that video, right? And hear someone else explain it other than your teacher, right? And sometimes just that slight different perspective can make things click, because I would say there's a couple things that can be hard to wrap your brain around, right? Like fundamental theorem of calculus, pretty important, right? But not every student can explain what those two parts are, okay? So you might have to access, like, I would say Khan Academy is a really great one, right? Because Sal just really breaks it down to the most fundamental blocks. He won't just explain something once too. So like he'll weave in the explanation throughout. And I find that most people think the videos are on the slow end. So right, they have to kind of like speed it up or whatever. But if you're like, other things don't work for me, I would say Khan Academy will probably be a great resource, right? You're just like, I didn't understand these other videos. They go too quickly, right? Because especially the AP YouTube channel, some of those are like college professors, like it's good, but I could definitely see how some other teachers might be like, oh yeah, this comes natural to me, so I'm going to skip this step, or I'm going to, gloss over it. Okay, and yeah. And if you're in that learning phase, how I said, like, only stick with the AP material. That's if you are in review phase. If you're still in learning phase, it's totally okay to do practice problems on like a specific subject until you get it down, and then you can try the AP version of it. So yeah, still you can do practice problems, you can do third-party worksheets, things like that, just to help you get the handle of whatever concepts you need. Okay. Of course, like I said, the best resource of all are those official practice tests from old years. Okay. I think if you go like really, really far back, the format is different. So then like, your timing is not that good. So I would try to do the most recent ones first. But yeah, if you're doing like 10 practice tests, as long as you're learning from them, you almost cannot get a 5. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you need to get to that level, but I've heard of people going a little crazy and really putting in a lot of work. But if you're someone who is taking multiple APs, right, like you do need to manage your time and manage your studying. So don't skimp on this though. Okay, I'm not saying take every practice test possible, but take a fair amount, at least until you get to the target score that you want, right? If you can do it in practice, then you can do it on test day, right? But don't be like, oh yeah, I got a 3, but you know what? On test day, I'll just like focus extra harder. I'll just turn it up. It rarely works that way. Okay. So, okay. Some other tips I have, right, would be, you're taking this test. Yes, I understand that you're under time pressure, okay? But I still highly encourage you to write out all of your work, okay? You might be like, oh, well, when I punch things into the calculator, that is writing, right? But no. Write it down on paper and then transfer it into the calculator, okay? There's something about writing that really, you're thinking as you're writing, right? It's like you're writing it and then your brain is also figure out, hey, is what I'm writing making sense? And this is where you can catch, your mistakes at that point, okay? And do it fully. Don't just like carry one line to the next, right? Don't just like evaluate one part of an expression and say like, oh, I'll just put it all together at the end, because it's very easy to drop parts of your expression. Okay, so just be careful. Like I said, This is the same kind of thing that I advocate for on the SAT and ACT as well, right? Because it's multiple choice, or because there's only 2 possible rubric points to get, it really is no room for partial credit, unlike what you have in your class tests, right? Where your teacher sees that you understand the setup and you did so much good work. So, okay, I'm just going to do -1. Well, on here, if you make a mistake and your mistake shows up in an answer choice and you choose it, you get 0, right? So it's just not worth it. Almost, in fact, rather run out of time and miss and have to randomly guess on a couple questions at the end, but at least I don't make any mistakes. That's better than making a ton of mistakes throughout and then finishing the test. Okay, guaranteed. All right. Make sure you are not rounding your partial answers. So that's another thing, using a calculator and writing out your work, right? You're gonna write out √2, right? You're not, but maybe if you were just like doing calculator stuff, you know, you just like might be like, oh, okay, well, it was up there, I'm just gonna write 1.4 or something. Don't do that, right? You can only round at the very end, right? So just carry everything through. And this is, and having it on paper will help set everything up, right? For you to put into your calculator. Also, writing out your work can go a long way to getting that partial credit on free responses, right? Because like I said, so much of it is you get credit for the setup. So if you just like write out the answer, even if the answer is right, you're not going to get full credit, okay? So show your setup, show that even if you don't know how to do a problem, show what you do know, right? Like, okay, I might not know how to like take this integral, but I'm going to show you how I set it up, and like I'm going to show you what I would do if I could do, you know what I mean? Like, okay, I'll be like, okay, I don't know how to take this integral, but let's say I did take it, then this will be my answer. And then if I had to continue, what would I do with that answer, right? I would put the units on it, try to get every little bit of partial credit that you can, okay? And like I said, oh yeah, and I talked about answering all parts of the question, right? To go to the third bullet point. Very important not to leave points on the table that you can do, but you just happen to miss that, okay? So I would even go so far as to annotate the question, right? If there are multiple parts in the question, make sure you like highlight it in some way, right? Or write a reminder for yourself, okay? And the last thing I'll say is that don't buy a new calculator for this test, right? Stick with your trusty graphing calculator that you're using all year and make sure you're comfortable with it, because you will definitely need it for those calc sections, okay? It's not like the SAT or the ACT where, oh, calculator is allowed. Well, you can still technically take the entire SAT and ACT without a calculator and get a perfect score. It was allowed, but it was not required. On the AP Calc exam, there will be questions where it straight up is required. Like they will give you an integral that you cannot evaluate without a calculator, right? And so if you don't have your calculator, you don't bring it, or you don't know how to do an integral on your calculator, that's just like a lost point right there. And it's like a very easy point that you lost too, right? Because it's just a matter of like entering in stuff and pressing enter. So yes, so please make sure it's charged, make sure you know how to do all the basic things on your calculator, make sure that, you know, it's in the right mode. You're not doing radian, you're not doing degrees when you need it to be in radians, things like that, right? There's going to be stuff where, yeah, make sure you're comfortable like playing around with the windows and exploring the graph, okay? because that will happen a lot on the calc section too, right? They expect you to graph that function and trace around and explore the behavior. Okay. All right. Well, if there are any questions, okay, feel free to email me again, Tran at esmprep.com, and I'll do my best to help you out. Okay, whether that's helping you with a concept that you just need like another voice on, or you want some high level advice similar to what we talked about today, or you just are like, hey, I need some resources, and where are those old tests at, right? Just let me know, and I'll help you out. All right, well, that's all I have for today, and I want to wish everyone good luck in their studying. Good luck in May when you take the exam, and I hope you enjoyed the course itself, because it was one of my favorite classes in high school. Just very satisfying to see how everything came together, right? Everything, all the math I was learning for 12 years, culminated in this. And I hope you saw the beauty in calculus as well, just like how elegant it all is, and how incredible that that it was even discovered, and in fact independently, right? Just multiple people, and it's just amazing. So like I said, good luck, and thank you for tuning in, and that's it. All right, bye.